For over 5 decades, Jodie Foster has been a figure of brilliance, intensity, and enigma. From the very moment she burst onto the screen as a child prodigy, the world watched her grow up under blinding lights, navigating a maze of early fame, controversy, and personal discovery. She was the poised, intelligent girl who could outshine any adult actor, and the woman who later became an Oscar-winning legend, director, and one of Hollywood's most fiercely private icons. But behind her composed smile and brilliant mind was a life marred by haunting shadows and unimaginable pain. Few know the torment she endured off camera. The pressure of being sexualized far too young, the trauma tied to her name after an attempted presidential assassination, the decades-long struggle for identity, privacy, and peace, and the heartbreaking toll it all took on her relationships, her career, and her soul. Jodie Foster's story is not just about talent, it's about survival. And now, at 62, many fans are asking the heartbreaking question, what really happened to the once untouchable star? Why did she walk away from the spotlight? And what truths has she carried in silence all these years? This is not the Jodie Foster you saw on screen. This is the real story, and once you hear it, you'll never look at her the same way again. Jodie Foster never had a childhood in the way most people understand it. From the time she was just 3 years old, she was working, not playing. Her mother, Brandy Almond, who had recently divorced Jodie's father, was determined to provide for her children and saw something special in little Jodie, a rare combination of beauty, intellect, and camera-ready composure. By age 6, Jodie had already appeared in dozens of commercials. And by age 12, she would be cast in one of the most controversial roles in cinema history, a role that would mark her for life. That role, of course, was Iris, the child prostitute in Taxi Driver, opposite Robert De Niro. It was a performance that earned her an Academy Award nomination and placed her directly in the crosshairs of both Hollywood's admiration and its darkest obsessions. For a child barely old enough to understand the world, Jodie was thrust into a world where adults made all the rules and none of the boundaries. The camera adored her, but it also devoured her. She once said that acting was something she did to please her mother, not herself. Every gesture, every line, every look, all orchestrated by adults who profited off her innocence. While other children were learning to ride bikes or attend school dances, Jodie was reading scripts, working 12-hour days, and being interviewed by grown men who often blurred the line between admiration and obsession. It wasn't just unsettling. It was traumatic, but Jodie Foster was no ordinary child. Even then, she was fiercely intelligent, fluent in French by age 10, and enrolled in private schooling between shoots. She was determined to control her own narrative, to protect what little she could from a world that wanted to define her. Yet the cost of that control was heavy. Fame meant isolation. Her schoolmates didn't understand her. The public only knew her as the girl from Bugsy Malone, Freaky Friday, or Taxi Driver. They didn't see the anxiety, the pressure, or the questions she couldn't yet answer about who she was and who she was expected to become. Then came 1981, a year that would forever change her life in ways no script could prepare her for. A man named John Hinckley Jr., obsessed with Jodie's character in Taxi Driver, attempted to assassinate President Ronald Reagan, believing it would impress her. Suddenly, Jodie's face wasn't just on movie posters. It was on front-page headlines, dragged into the darkest corners of American news. The FBI interrogated her. Security followed her. Reporters stalked her college dorm at Yale, where she had just enrolled in a bid for normalcy. Her name had become a symbol of obsession, violence, and tragedy. And she hadn't even turned 20. In the years that followed, Jodie withdrew even further from public life. She gave fewer interviews, refused to discuss the assassination attempt, and focused intensely on her education and behind-the-scenes work. To many it looked like resilience, but to those who truly understood, it was a defense mechanism, a way to reclaim the parts of herself that had been taken by fame, by men, by the media, and by a world that never asked her if she wanted to be famous in the first place. That silent suffering masked by brilliance and discipline would become the defining tension of her life. By her early 20s, Jodie Foster had already lived through more trauma and public scrutiny than most people experience in a lifetime. And while she would eventually return to Hollywood as a director, a producer, and an Oscar-winning actress, the scars of her stolen childhood and the dangers of being famous too young never fully healed. They followed her quietly, shaping every relationship, every decision, every step away from the spotlight. Her success was undeniable, but so was the heartbreak behind it. As Jodie Foster moved through adulthood, her talent continued to dazzle the world, but so did her refusal to play Hollywood's game. She was never one for the spotlight, never a tabloid darling. She didn't date publicly. She didn't party. She avoided red carpets unless it was absolutely necessary. While her contemporaries chased magazine covers and celebrity headlines, Jodie built a wall around herself, high, impenetrable, and fiercely protected. To many, she seemed like a mystery. But to those who looked closely, her silence wasn't a mystery at all. It was a shield, forged from years of exploitation, obsession, and pain. Her breakout role in The Accused in 1988 was nothing short of revolutionary. Playing a woman who survives a brutal sexual assault, Jodie Foster delivered a performance so raw and devastating that it shook audiences to their core. It won her the Academy Award for Best Actress, her first, but the irony wasn't lost on anyone close to her. The woman who had been sexualized on screen at age 12 was now winning awards for portraying a woman fighting to be believed. It was a full-circle moment, powerful, triumphant, but also tragically symbolic of the pain she had carried since childhood. Then came The Silence of the Lambs, and another Oscar. As Clarice Starling, Foster gave life to one of the most iconic female characters in film history. But again, beneath the surface of that strong, intelligent, driven character was a reflection of her own reality. A young woman trying to rise above trauma, navigate a world dominated by men, and hold her own in a system designed to control her. It wasn't just acting. It was personal, always personal. But even as her career soared, her personal life remained shrouded in secrecy. For years, Foster dodged questions about her sexuality. In a time when being openly gay could mean career suicide, she chose silence over disclosure. It wasn't shame. It was survival. Hollywood had a long, cruel history of discarding queer artists, especially women. And Jodie, ever the strategist, wasn't about to let the industry destroy her for being herself. Still, the pressure mounted. Rumors swirled, tabloids speculated, and Jodie simply kept her head down, refusing to give them what they wanted. It was a decision that cost her dearly in emotional terms. She once said in a rare interview, "There are so many things you give away when you're a public person. Sometimes you don't even realize they're gone until years later." That quiet admission revealed more than any tabloid ever could. For Jodie, privacy wasn't just a preference. It was a means of preserving her sanity, of keeping something sacred when so much of her life had been taken from her without consent. Her romantic relationships, particularly with producer Sidney Bernard, remained largely behind closed doors. They raised children together, built a life, and shared decades of love without ever playing into Hollywood's narrative. And when Jodie finally acknowledged her sexuality publicly during a Golden Globe speech in 2013, it wasn't a grand reveal. It was a weary declaration. One that came with exhaustion, not celebration. She joked about coming out 1,000 years ago, and in that moment, it was clear. Jodie Foster had never hidden who she was. She had simply refused to let the world twist it into something for their entertainment. But while her bravery was commendable, the years of holding it all in had taken their toll. Jodie's battles with anxiety, depression, and a deep mistrust of the media became more visible in her later years. She began acting less, directing more, often choosing projects that explored themes of isolation, control, and redemption. It was art imitating life. Her characters were often misunderstood, complicated, quietly aching, just like her. The real tragedy wasn't that Jodie Foster faded from the spotlight. The real tragedy was that the spotlight had always demanded her silence, her secrecy, her suffering. And now, as she entered her 60s, the walls she'd spent a lifetime building were still there, protecting her, yes, but also keeping the world at arm's length. Because when you've been wounded by fame, it's hard to ever feel safe again. By the time Jodie Foster reached her 50s, Many expected her to settle into the role of a celebrated elder in Hollywood, a guiding voice, a revered presence, someone willing to open up about the life she had so fiercely protected. But that wasn't the case. Instead, Foster pulled back even more, rarely appearing in public, and speaking only when she absolutely had something to say. To some, it looked like contentment, a woman finally at peace. But to those who knew her story, it felt more like retreat, a slow, quiet surrender to the weight of decades spent surviving a life that never truly felt like her own. Jodie's most intimate heartbreaks were never made public in the traditional Hollywood sense. There were no scandalous breakups, no messy tabloid fodder. But that doesn't mean there wasn't pain. Her split from longtime partner Sidney Bernard, after over 14 years together and 2 children, was a deeply personal fracture. The two remained close, co-parenting lovingly, but those who observed Foster privately noticed a weariness take over her, a quiet loneliness that she carried with her, even in the rare interviews she agreed to do. There was no bitterness in her voice, only a deep, unspoken ache. A woman tired of being misunderstood, tired of protecting the parts of her life the world wouldn't allow her to live out loud. For someone as intelligent and introspective as Foster, aging in an industry obsessed with youth added another cruel layer. Directors stopped calling. Studio heads offered her the same tired roles, grieving mothers, distant matriarchs, fading stars. But Jodie Foster was never one to conform. Instead, she found her way behind the camera, telling stories no one else would touch. Stories of loss, of isolation, of quiet resilience. Films like The Beaver, which explored mental illness, and Money Monster, which tackled corruption and media manipulation, revealed how her artistic choices reflected her own internal battles. The themes weren't random, they were a mirror. Before we continue, if you found Jodie Foster's story as moving as we have, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We're committed to telling the deeper, more emotional stories of Hollywood's most iconic stars, the ones you don't hear about in headlines. And don't forget to leave a comment below with your thoughts or memories of Jodie Foster's powerful performances. Your voice matters. But even as she pursued this quieter, more creative path, there was still a sense that Jodie Foster had never truly been allowed to rest. Not really. She had survived everything. Childhood stardom, obsession, scrutiny, heartbreak. But survival is not the same as healing. Those close to her say that she's still haunted by what fame took from her. The freedom to grow up privately, to love openly, to fall apart without judgment. Every smile she flashes on a red carpet is careful, every appearance choreographed with precision. She is still protecting herself, even after all these years. Her more recent interviews hint at a deep fatigue, not just from the industry, but from the weight of being Jodie Foster. She often talks about craving a simpler life, far from cameras, where she can write, read, and raise her children in peace. And perhaps that's what makes her story so quietly tragic, the fact that the world never really allowed her that simplicity. From the moment she was 3 years old, the spotlight claimed her. And while she rose to its challenges with dignity and brilliance, it took something from her in return, something she may never get back. Now, at 62, Jodie Foster is still revered, still respected, but more absent than ever. Her face is seen less and less. Her name appears in headlines only when she chooses to speak. She is in many ways a ghost in a town she once ruled, a legend hiding in plain sight. Not because she failed, but because fame itself failed her. It gave her everything, except peace. In an industry obsessed with reinvention, Jodie Foster never changed to please anyone. She didn't play the celebrity game, didn't chase fame, and didn't shapeshift for the sake of popularity. She was, and remains, unapologetically herself. But being yourself in Hollywood comes at a cost. Over time, it isolates. It wears you down. And for Jodie Foster, that cost has been the quiet, painful detachment from the very world she once conquered. Now at 62, her presence is more myth than reality, a name spoken in reverence, a face remembered fondly, but rarely seen. She didn't fade. She withdrew. And the question that lingers is, did Hollywood ever truly deserve her? The weight of her legacy is undeniable. 2 Academy Awards, dozens of iconic roles, an unshakable reputation for integrity and brilliance. She shattered stereotypes, redefined female roles in cinema, and stood her ground when others would have crumbled. But ask anyone who's followed her story, and they'll tell you the same thing. Jodie Foster's greatest battles weren't in front of the camera. They were in the quiet moments, away from the crowds, in the aftermath of unwanted attention. Behind the walls she built to keep her soul intact. She has spoken rarely but poignantly about the toll of being watched. "There's a loneliness in being known," she once said. That single sentence echoes the very heart of her tragedy. Jodie Foster was never chasing stardom. It was thrust upon her. And once it had her, it never let go. Not when she wanted to grow up quietly. Not when a disturbed man used her name to justify violence. Not when she needed time to understand her identity, or space to build a family outside the public eye. Fame clung to her like a shadow, ever present and always unwelcome. And yet, even in that darkness, she created a family. She raised 2 sons with deep love and purpose. She built a private world far from Hollywood, one rooted in honesty and authenticity. While the public saw less of her, those close to her saw more. A woman who found peace not on the red carpet, but in the pages of books, the calm of quiet mornings, and the company of people who loved her not as a star, but simply as Jodie. In recent years, Foster has spoken of retirement not as a dramatic farewell, but as a natural closing of a long, turbulent chapter. She no longer seeks roles that excite her. She no longer needs to prove anything. She's given enough, more than enough. Her life, her youth, her pain, all served up to an industry that applauded her brilliance while ignoring her cries for space, for respect, for freedom. And now, in this final phase, she's chosen silence once more, not out of fear, but as a final act of rebellion. She's leaving on her own terms. It's this quiet goodbye that cuts the deepest. Not because we've lost her, but because we never truly knew her. The tragedy of Jodie Foster isn't scandalous or sensational. It's slow, aching, and deeply human. It's the story of a woman who gave the world everything it asked for, and kept almost nothing for herself. And while she may live out her days far from the spotlight, her absence is a stark reminder of what fame can cost, even when you're as strong, as gifted, and as brilliant as Jodie Foster. She was the genius child, the misunderstood adult, the guarded icon, and the woman who endured what few could survive. And now, as the lights dim and the curtain closes, the only thing left is a haunting truth. Behind every quiet smile, behind every silent award speech, behind every step away from the public, was a lifetime of pain the world chose to ignore. And that is the most heartbreaking part of all.